This slideshow will provide you with an overview of best practice when completing FBAs and BIPs. It will also help you to become more familiar with the district's new FBA.BIP form. A FBA, or a functional behavioral analysis, is a systematic way of determining the cause or function of a particular behavior. Identifying the function of a behavior is especially important when creating a BIP, or behavior intervention plan, and makes the BIP process much more efficient and effective. When completing an FBA, information can be gathered in a number of ways, including through observations, interviews, which can include teacher, parent, and student, and file reviews. FBAs can also vary in complexity depending on the severity of the behavior, the setting in which the behaviors occur, and the information you already have on the student. Generally, as the severity of the behaviors increase, as well as the settings in which the behaviors occur, the complexity of the FBA will also increase. The ultimate goal of completing an FBA is to collect enough data to make a reasonable hypothesis about the function of a behavior. Keep in mind that in many instances you may conclude that there is more than one function for a particular behavior. In these instances, try to identify one primary function to build your BIP around. If you determine over time that the BIP is not effective, you may want to review your FBA data to see if you need to adjust the original hypothesis on the function of the behavior. When completing an FBA, the first step is to identify a target behavior. In many instances, students will be demonstrating more than one problem behavior. It is important to identify and focus on the one or two behaviors that are most problematic. Once you have an established plan in place that proves to be effective in managing the most problematic behavior, you can begin to shift your focus toward other behaviors if need be. The target behavior that is chosen for the FBA must be specific. Building a plan around disruptive or off-task behaviors is probably not specific enough. The behavior that is chosen must be measurable and easy to identify. For instance, instead of focusing on disruptive behaviors, a good target behavior may be speaking without raising his or her hand during instructional times. If more general target behaviors such as physical aggression are used, the specific behaviors that are grouped into the more general target behavior group should be identified. In the case of physical aggression, this could include behaviors like hitting, pinching, pushing, or other physical behaviors. When evaluating the target behavior, you'll also want to note the frequency of the behavior within a given amount of time, how long the behavior lasts, the intensity of the behavior, and how much time passes between reoccurrences. Once a target behavior is established, it's important to identify the antecedents of the behavior. Antecedents are things that directly precede the behavior and serve as a trigger. When identifying antecedents, it's important to include the setting, the time of day, who is present, and any tasks, activities, or events taking place. For instance, an antecedent for a student's behavior may be being asked by his or her classroom teacher to complete work during morning math block. In addition to identifying antecedents of the target behavior, it's also important to note any setting events that may be impacting the student. Setting events are internal or external factors that temporarily impact how a student responds to a situation. Examples of setting events could include an illness, a change in routine, family distress, medication changes, a lack of sleep, or other things that increase the likelihood of the target behavior occurring when a trigger is present. Something else to consider is whether or not the student has the necessary skills to perform the task that is being asked of him or her. Skill deficits also often lead to frustration, which can then lead to behavioral issues. The next step in completing an FBA is identifying the consequences that follow the target behavior. In doing so, you not only want to take notice of what the student does immediately after the target behavior occurs, but also how the student's teacher and peers react to the target behavior. A consequence could be anything that reinforces or maintains that behavior. Some common consequences include gaining or avoiding teacher or peer attention, gaining control, avoiding schoolwork, communication difficulties, or sensory stimulation. A BIP, or Behavior Intervention Plan, is a structured plan that is created based on the results of the FBA. The BIP must be specific and measurable. Most behavior plans will include replacement behaviors, which are positive behaviors that take the place of the target behaviors and serve the same function. In addition to including replacement behaviors, BIP should also include positive behavioral supports that are geared toward reinforcing replacement behaviors. Consequences can also be paired with positive reinforcement when appropriate. All BIPs should include a goal and a plan for collecting data so that the intervention team can determine if the BIP is effective. The goal should be developed off the baseline behavioral data that is collected during the FBA process. The data collection plan should indicate when data will be collected, how data will be collected, who will be collecting data, and when the plan will be reviewed. When analyzing the behavioral data, it is important to remember that even small gains should be celebrated. Also remember that behavior intervention plans are designed to manage behaviors. Expecting a BIP to completely fix a behavior may be an unrealistic expectation. To recap, some key components of BIPs include clearly stated expectations and goals, a way to measure behaviors and collect data, teachable replacement behaviors, and positive reinforcement strategies. It is also important to indicate who will be implementing the plan and collecting data, where and when the plan will be in place, and how long the plan will be in place. There are many situations when an FBA and BIP might be appropriate. Some examples could include when antecedents or reinforcements are not easy to identify, when it is not clear why the behavior is occurring, when the positive reinforcement or consequences that are being used do not seem to have an impact on the student's behavior, or when the student does not appear to be invested in following school rules or expectations. Other times when you should consider using an FBA and BIP can include when a behavioral pattern or trend seems to be forming, when behaviors are becoming more frequent, when a student has a high number of office discipline referrals or suspensions, or when a student is not responding to interventions and it appears as though a more structured plan is necessary. Other instances could include when a student's current programming does not seem to be working, when a student's behavior puts them or others at risk for harm, or when a change in placement or more intensive interventions are being contemplated. Two other instances when an FBA and BIP are necessary are when a student's behavior results in a disciplinary change in placement and the behavior is found to be a manifestation of the student's disability, and when the seclusion or restraint of a student occurs. In cases of seclusion and restraint, if the student has an IEP, the IEP team must review the IEP to make sure that FBA has been conducted and that the necessary positive behavioral interventions and supports are in place. For students who do not have positive behavioral intervention and support in place, a FBA and BIP must be completed. Who should complete a FBA for a particular student depends on the complexity of the case. Simple FBAs, as previously discussed, can be completed by most staff members. More complex FBAs must be completed by individuals who have been trained on the FBA process. Within the Oshkosh Area School District, special education teachers will usually be responsible for completing FBAs for students who are receiving special education services. The school psychologist or program support teacher can support the special education teacher in these instances. For students who do not receive special education services, the school psychologist will usually be responsible for completing the FBA. The Oshkosh Area School District currently has a new FBA and BIP form available. This form can be accessed on Skyward when used with special education students or on the district portal page. Here's a look at the first page of the new district FBA form. As you can see, the form asks for student identification information along with an area to check the methods for data collection. The form then asks for a list of behaviors that are a concern from which the target behavior will be identified. The target behavior is further defined by frequency, severity, and duration. Once the target behavior is identified, the form asks for antecedents of the behavior. The antecedents are divided into the categories of events, places, times, and people. Also included on the first page is a checkbox that asks if the student has necessary skills to complete the tasks that are being asked of him or her. The second page of the FBA form looks at the consequences of the behavior. After identifying the consequences, a behavioral statement can be made that addresses the function of the behavior. Once the function is identified, the form moves into the BIP. The BIP begins with a place to enter preventative strategies for the target behavior and then moves into instructional strategies that aim at reteaching replacement behaviors. The BIP form goes on to ask for a narrative of the plan to teach positive skills and replacement behaviors. It then asks for possible positive incentives that will be effective in reinforcing positive behaviors. The next section then asks for possible correction procedures, both at the classroom and at the administrative level. The final portion of the FBA.BIP form offers a data collection option. This section helps to establish a behavioral goal, and it establishes the procedure for collecting data. There is also a section that reframes the plan and guides the layout of the final plan. If you have further questions about the FBA.BIP process or forms, please contact your building's school psychologist or program support teacher. Thank you for your time.